So this webinar, the first of three, is focusing on surveillance and inspection. And built into really all of these webinars, we kind of link the topics in these webinars to regulatory requirements as a dam owner in this province. There are lots of requirements, and part of this training provided through the webinar is to make you aware of these requirements, make you feel comfortable with the requirements, and provide you with some ideas for best practices to enable you to meet those requirements. So we'll often show some text extracted from the regulatory requirements. And so for today, we will review the dam classification system, kind of a key thing about operating a dam in this province to understand what its dam classification is. So we'll cover that quickly. Then we move into kind of the surveillance and inspection component for today's webinar. And we'll talk about surveillance frequency and inspection frequency. We'll talk about things to look for, things to watch for. So when we go out to our dams, what are we looking for? And so we'll give some examples of what to look for and discussions about why to watch for those features. And we'll wrap up a little bit with the importance of documenting your surveillance and inspections. These are kind of best practices, and some of these things are embedded in the regulatory requirements. So, regulatory requirements. The responsibility of a dam owner in this province. And so this text is kind of extracted from the regulations. An owner of the dam must properly inspect, maintain, and repair the dam to keep it in good working condition. And so this webinar will focus on the red part, underlined word inspection. Come back a week from now, and we'll move to looking at the maintenance and repair aspects of owning and operating a dam. And of course, why is the regulations wanting the dam owner to do this? Really to protect public safety, protect the environment, and ensure there's no losses to land or property, typically downstream of the dam should the dam fail and breach. And so the owner has the responsibility to ensure that the dam operates in a safe manner. Now, that's the regulatory requirements, and embedded there, if you were to look at these documents online, you'll see a table like this, which guides some minimum frequency of activities associated with some of the surveillance and inspection aspects. And the lower two rows in this table, we will not talk, we won't refer to those today. That's topics for next Saturday, webinar 2. The top 3 rows, so reviewing the dam classification, site surveillance, informal inspection, we will talk about. Now, it's interesting to see how the minimum frequency of these activities is somewhat guided by the dam classification. So the top row shows low, significant, very high and high, and I'm pretty sure none of you, I hope none of you own an extreme, a dam with an extreme classification. So you're likely to be over here, and this is guiding the minimum frequency of activities. And you may decide in conjunction with the dam safety officer that perhaps more frequent inspections are warranted to ensure that your dam is operating in a safe manner. There is, you might have heard of the term the dam safety review. It's another, essentially inspection is often occurs as part of that process, but it has a different purpose than these sort of site surveillance informal inspection, which is really the focus of today's webinar. So coming back, some of these, if you were to alter these, you should have a plan for those inspections, and it's hopefully written down in your operations, maintenance, and surveillance manual. We sometimes call that OM&S manual. And that manual is shared with your dam safety officer. And if you're going to inspect at a less frequent rate, you want to have approval for that inspection and have a justification for that. with a communication with your dam safety officer. And so this province is blessed with dam safety officers scattered throughout the province, as well as some dam safety officers based out of Victoria. And so if you have a dam less than 9 meters high, which is probably most of the people participating today, you're likely interacting with a regional dam safety officer. And we have various folks at the various branches scattered throughout the province. And I encourage you to think of them as a resource as opposed to, I don't know, an enemy. You work with these individuals to help provide guidance and feedback on how you're operating your dam. So they have a duty to kind of ensure that our dams are operated safely, but they are very knowledgeable people and can be resourced for you as a dam owner. And so feel free to reach out and contact your dam safety officer if you have any questions. So first topic, and this could warrant essentially a whole webinar in of itself, a dam classification. So we're going to go over it quite quickly. Aaron and I might have chatted with some of you in the past because we gave, in the pre-COVID days, we gave in-person training and workshops with the Caribou Cattlemen's Association. So we did workshops in 100 Mile House and Williams Lake and Kamloops and Kelowna. And part of those workshops, we spent a little bit more time on dam classification, but for today, we're going to have to go quick. And so it is kind of a requirement. You have to classify your dam, as you can see here, no matter what your classification is, you need to classify and review that classification on a yearly basis. Mm-hmm. And the purpose for that is things could change. And your classification can change, and that might trigger the need to change the frequency of your surveillance and inspections. So it's a requirement for you to classify your dam on an annual basis. And it's applicable to all dams. So it's something you should be comfortable in doing, and it can be done fairly quickly after you've done it for a couple of years, once you understand what's entailed in that process. And your dam classification depends primarily on the consequences of it if it fails. It's not a function of the probability of failure, whether it will fail or not. You have to assume that your dam fails, and if it does fail, or assume that it does fail, what would the consequences be? And we break them into 3 categories. Could there be associated loss of life? Could there be environmental and cultural losses? Could there be economic losses? And we look at those 3 categories separately, and whichever is the kind of the worst case in those 3 categories is going to dictate the classification for your dam.
Dwayne, and one thing I want to add from this slide is that these are all the worst case scenarios, right? Dwayne mentioned that. A lot of these categories have all kinds of different types of consequences, and actually in the next slide here.
Aaron, I'll let you continue because I was supposed to switch over anyways.
Yeah, no worries. I thought I'd just let you go there, but I was just trying to take over the slide here, Dwayne, and I think I lost control of it. If you could add me.
Give me 1 second.
Okay, there we go. Thanks, Dwayne. There we go. So Dwayne also mentioned too, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the regulations. We covered a lot of that. We do have to cover the dam classification a little bit more because it is so critical for all 3 of these webinars. So in the last slide, we just learned that the consequences of failure is really what determines your consequence classification. So that classification is what the regulation determines what is your minimum requirements. So there really are minimum best practices. So this is the table here that defines which classification you're in, right? So if your dam could potentially kill no one, then you're probably in a low consequence of classification. And I'm just looking at loss of life right now. So as that increases, you will automatically get pushed into higher classification. So for example, if there's temporary population at risk, that could be campsites, something like that, downstream, but no permanent homes or things of that nature, then you may be a significant consequence dam, and it goes on from there. So I'm going to be sharing with you some links as well. So because we all are required as dam owners to review this classification annually, we need to understand what temporary or permanent means. So there is a guideline, so you could actually click on that link, or you could check it out later, but it gives lots of not only definitions for those terms, but also some interpretation, which is very helpful, certainly when it comes to infrastructure and other things. So here's an example for temporary only. People are only occasionally and irregularly in the dam breach inundation zone, for example, stopping temporarily, passing through on transportation routes, or participating in recreational activities. And then it'll give more information. So this way you can look at your own dam, and then you can look at this table in the classification, and you can kind of determine where you are. So we have this red line because that red line is right when all of a sudden a bunch of things trigger. And actually, you could even draw another red line right here, right between low and significant, because that's actually where part 3 of the regulation kicks in. So we're going to cover that a little bit more in just a second here. So dam classification, we have to annually redetermine it. A couple slides back, that was one of the things we have to do, but for all classifications. I'd even recommend non-regulated dams, because if you have a minor dam, if you could potentially kill someone, it will become a regulated dam, and you don't know that unless you look at it regularly. So we all need to do that. This does not need to be submitted to a dam safety officer. If in the event there is a change, then there is a requirement to submit it. But generally, we're going to be looking at it. We find out, okay, there's been no change. We would have to make a note of it, and that's the last thing. We need to make a record of that redetermination and keep it on file. So we'll just walk you through that in just a second. So there's pretty much 5 steps, kind of like 6 if you include the second last point there, but you want to review your previous determination. Typically, when the dam was built or something like that, you would have some sort of record or some sort of determination. If you have a higher consequence dam or a larger dam that has potentially higher impact, generally you'll have a dam break study, or you'll have some kind of mapping, whether it be hazard mapping or flood inundation mapping, which would just show depth of water or something. You would have something like that on file to help you use the interpretation guideline, and it would probably already have a determination in there, but you could use that to reference and then just see, has anything changed, right? So the first thing is review that. Second, understand if there are any changes downstream. So your activity could be as simple as just taking a drive down there, maybe looking at some recent aerial maps, something of that nature. But you need to understand, is there anything changed? Update the most potential severe consequences, or try to get a sense of how much they would have changed if there are any changes. And then you use that table and the interpretation guideline to determine if that changes. And then finally, you want to document that. And that's something that is a regulated requirement. It can be as simple as just a one line, I did this at this time, I reviewed the downstream by driving or physically, and then just making a note of how you went through and do that, and just keep that with your dam files. So classification is not only just the impact or the potential consequences of it failing. There's 2 actual criteria that puts you into a classification. So if you don't, well, I should say, if the consequences don't bump you up, then it's possible that just automatically your dimensions will. So here they are, right? If you have a dam that is less than 7.5 meters, but you have very little water in it, it won't automatically become regulated, right? So if you're in this green area, you may be a minor dam. It would only become a regulated dam if it has consequences of failure that deem it, having a risk that means it should be classified as a regulated dam. So, and you can see how this sort of works. And we're going to have another slide here that'll show it a little bit better. As soon as you're bigger than this blue size, so greater than 10,000 cubic meters or above 7.5 meters or anywhere in there, you're automatically a regulated dam. So typically a low consequence dam. And if you're in this light area, just part 3 doesn't apply. Again, of course, as long as the consequences don't bump it up into a higher category. So, and one other thing I want to point out, this is live storage. So I'll clarify the difference between live and total storage in one of the next slides here. So here's a perfect example. If you have a constructed water body, a pond or a dugout, like this first one here, it's not a dam because you don't have impounded water that has the potential risk of getting released. So that's not a dam. This next one is also not a dam. Well, it's a dam, it's not a regulated dam. Just like in this past one, you're going to be in this green area here. So the regulators are not that interested in your dam because it likely will have very low risk. As soon as you have more than that minor dam amount, then you're automatically a regulated dam. And so it doesn't matter what classification your dam is, you have to review your consequence classification annually. So if we do that annually, we'll always know what our classification is. If we know what our classification is, we'll always know what the minimum best practices to manage that dam is and how we can interpret the regulation. So Dwayne, we have a poll here.
Yes, so we kind of wanted to learn a little bit about you, the audience. And so to do that, I'm going to activate a poll. Remember, it's anonymous. And the poll will have these 3 questions. And if we could, we would like you to, if I can get the poll to work, I'll go back here. Answer the questions. Just use your finger or mouse and go through, and we can learn who you are, how long you've owned a dam, and what your dam's classification is. So feel free to pick up your mouse or tap on the bullets with your finger. So the votes are coming in now. You can't see them, but I can. Let me just tell you, we've got about 12, 15 votes in so far. And so for the first question, as we would kind of hope for this webinar, a bulk of the people are a dam owner or a dam operator. And then for how long have you owned a dam? As the votes come in, it's a little over 50% of the participants have indicated greater than 15 years. So you've owned a dam for a long enough time that you've seen the regulations in this province change. and the implications of those regulation changes you're probably a little bit familiar with. And the last question, what is your dam classification? It's spread out. So we got 30 votes in so far. It's 10% minor, 17% low, 23% significant, 27% high, and there's even a very high dam in there. So interesting. Maybe I'll just wait for another 10 seconds in case someone's still wanting to participate in the poll. And so clearly we have owner operators participating. We have more than half of the membership of this poll, and I'll share the results so you can see them too. More than 55% of the people have had their dam for more than 15 years. And there are some, I guess, maybe newbies, people that have had their dam for less than 5 years. So maybe perhaps you're in a more learning phase about being a responsible dam owner. And interestingly, we have quite a few dams that are in the high consequence category. Good, thank you.
Oh, and Dwayne, one thing, as we're just leaving the dam consequence topic, for all those who received the mail out package, there is a new brochure that breaks down those steps on how to do it, and it provides some additional information. So I'm also just going to link that in the chat. If anyone didn't get it in print, you can get it in digital as well. So.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop this this polling and we can continue. There is a couple more polls through this webinar. So, so we kind of raced through very quickly the dam classification, and if you were very observant on that questionnaire, everybody except for, I think there's one participant didn't know what their classification was or should be. I think it's my interpretation. And that's comforting. That means most people are pretty familiar with that whole process and the fact that they have to annually review that classification. So now we move on to sort of the more routine dam site surveillance and a formal annual inspection. Coming back to that kind of table, so we're going to be looking at this site surveillance and formal inspection and even the timing of those. And of course it varies depending on your classification. So we did have some high and very high dams, and that triggers the need to be potentially looking at these things quite frequently on a weekly basis, unless otherwise specified in your operations maintenance surveillance manual, and that manual has been accepted by the dam safety officer. So these site surveillances and formal inspections are activities that you as a dam owner or operator would be typically doing. You're not typically asking someone else to do that. It's usually the owner or the operator. The dam safety officer may conduct a site visit, and do almost the similar task as part of an audit of your dam safety management activities. But that's, that's not a substitute for your own inspections. And of course, when the DSO comes, they may identify some deficiencies in their audit and report them back to you as I guess, more of a courtesy to say you should be cleaning up the trees on your dam or dealing with rodents or whatever the deficiency was. So there needs to be some kind of idea of what you're going to do in terms of and how frequently you do it. And of course, as your classification increases, therefore the consequences of failure increases, you would be wanting to do that more frequently. And so you do need to come up with a surveillance schedule that makes sense for your dam, and it should be noted in your operations maintenance and surveillance manual, and then you should follow that. If you come up with that schedule, please follow it. And of course, this surveillance frequency and timing should probably be guided by considerations like dam access. We know that some of the dams in the province tend not, the water may be drawn down and the dam is locked away at the end of a road that has no access in the wintertime, for example. And so it's not particularly practical to inspect the dam at certain times of the year when the risk of the dam failing is really low. And something like that could be reflected in your manual. This climate change world that we're kind of living under may start to trigger more extreme events, precipitation events especially. I mean, we're kind of living through a winter this year that hasn't really even arrived yet in terms of temperature. But as we get these unusual events, whether that be a a very heavy rainstorm, or we haven't had one yet, but a large earthquake, right after those events, you're going to want to do a quick surveillance of your dam to make sure nothing's damaged or broken, or it's about to release a lot of water. So there's routine surveillances, and of course there's special surveillance after an unusual event. And when you do those, those quick site inspections and surveillance, maintain records and document what you saw, when you did it, what you saw, and use those records to kind of guide your maintenance activities. The dam safety section in this province provides a lot of templates to help you build things. So I'm just kind of highlighting that there's an operations, maintenance, and surveillance plan template or a document, and Aaron has produced additional templates for the BC Cattlemen's Association, and particularly Caribou Cattlemen's Association, and those can be modified by you to create a OM&S manual. And as part of that manual, so the manual is kind of this overarching document for operating and maintaining and repairing your dam. There should be a surveillance plan as part of that. And the BC Dam Safety section provides templates for that part as well. So this is kind of, if you went online, you'd find this document and you can download it. And it's got some text saying that, usually a dam owner would customize the form and make it their own. So there's sort of the raw template, and hey, there's mine for my dam, Dwayne's big pond. And so there may be certain features that are not applicable to my dam, so I'll strip them off. I added some stuff where I like to take photographs to document things, and you can make this document as a single page. This is what it is. It's a single page surveillance form that you can quickly tick off every time you're in the field, pop in a date somewhere, and then take that document and stick it in your OM&S manual, whether it be a paper version or a digital version, so that you have some sort of record of that and record of deficiencies. And deficiencies tend to creep over time, and you kind of read back through these things. You jump back for a couple of years, you can sort of see how things have crept along, and it might trigger the notion that now is the time to do some maintenance, for example, to remove the trees.
And Dwayne, speaking of creep, oftentimes we have measurement equipment, whether it be seepage weirs or other instrumentation that we like to check. And so if you have seepage weirs or something of that nature that you do regularly check, like Dwayne said, you're going to want to customize them. And we're going to have a little example later about how that would be useful and how it was useful. So.
Yeah, we're often looking for evidence of changes of behavior or condition of your dam through that inspection, because that change might be evidence that we're moving towards a less stable environment for your dam. And so, there's two examples, and here's yet another one. I think this was pulled off of an actual consulting report for a dam, and they all look the same, right? You can sort of see how they've broken down to look at the embankment itself. Is usually there's specific focus on the embankment, often the outlet, a low-level outlet, whatever structures allowing water to pass through your dam or underneath your dam, and then your spillway. Those are kind of the typical categories for the types of dams that people on this webinar would own and operate. And so, the bottom line is grab these things and use them. And so I think the tendency is for an owner operator to maybe drive out to the dam and look at it, which is good. So that they are using their most powerful instrumentation, which is their eyeballs connected to their brain. But it's important to try to be a little bit more rigorous at documenting what you see. And so by making this thing really easy to perform that documentation, you end up creating a record, and the record could be quite valuable to you. Now, yearly, there's a formal annual inspection. Let me go all the way back up to this table. So there's a formal annual inspection as well, and it covers things in a little bit more rigorous detail. So pretty much annually for everybody that's attending this webinar. And the BC Dam Safety section has created a template for that. So this is essentially a couple pages from that, and the pages continue. So it's not a single one-page document. And there's a lot of information on this formal annual inspection that will be static. It probably won't change from year to year. So the very first time you use it takes a little bit of effort to put in particularly this first page, a lot of the information. But as you move forward over time, year after year, a lot of that information probably will not change. And then you're just looking at various things. So, the upstream slope of the embankment, the crest, and then as you go through the document, it continues with the downstream slope, spillway, low level outlet, the reservoir, etc. And it's guiding you as really, do you have any actions that are required in terms of repairs or maintenance from non-minor maintenance needed repair, not applicable, and if it's not applicable, that means you should probably be tailoring this form and deleting things that aren't applicable, so you don't have this great big document covering stuff that's not applicable to your structure.
And
so
Dwayne,
yes.
another thing to bring up is all these things we're showing you are really for the owner to do. Although you may hire someone to help you with this, maybe the first time is best, make it a learning experience. And then you can do all these things yourself, provided you're comfortable doing them. So,
and part of this webinar series is to make you comfortable.
Yes.
To help you be comfortable in doing these things. So, so it's very similar to your kind of routine surveillance, except that it's a little bit more rigorous in terms of all the different components that you're looking at, and the documents are there. And so we talked about the kind of routine site surveillance as specified kind of in the regulatory requirements. Remember, this is a minimum requirement. So I have a quick little poll for you. It sounds like most of you are owning or operating a dam, and most of you know your classification. Do you think the surveillance, this is minimum surveillance as reflected in this document, is it appropriate for your dam? So I'll activate that next poll. I hope. Let's see here. I can get the right question coming up. And it's a fast and easy one for you to answer. So there it is. So votes are coming in a big flurry this time. And so as the votes come in, I am seeing about 70% of people have answered the question as a yes. And there are a 12% or so saying not sure, and some feeling that no, it's not an appropriate frequency. And for those that answered no, it'd be great to know why you feel that way, and you can feel free to enter that into the chat box if you can find the chat box. And for those that said no, are you thinking that it needs to be more frequent, or do you think it needs to be less frequent? So I'll end the poll now, and I'll share the results so you can sort of see what the audience viewpoint is. So we got about 70% thinking that this is about right for their structure, and some thinking not so, and and some not quite sure whether it needs to be higher or lower in terms of the frequency. And as an owner,
I was just going to say, I'll bring to the attention too, the little stars on each one was from our last table, right? So if it may not be ideal for your dam, you can always change those in your operation maintenance surveillance manual, provided you submit it and it's accepted. Because quite often it may not make sense to go weekly, for example, if there's no water in your dam that time of year, for example.
Right.
So that could explain some of the.
And we did, I'll race back here very quickly.
Yes.
These, so Aaron's referring to these little stars. You've got the ability to tailor that surveillance to make it make sense for your structure and to make it make sense for protecting, lives and property downstream, the risk that might be posed by your dam. And the mechanism to do that is to come up with a strategy reflected in your OM&S manual and share that manual with your dam safety officer and have it approved. Okay. Now, to aid this whole inspection process, there are a variety of resources that are available online, and I think perhaps most of you have seen the blue dam safety pocketbook. So that's a more recent thing that's been created. And then this document, which you can find online, the inspection and maintenance guidelines for dam safety. So these are both BC documents, and they're available through the dam safety section, and they're pretty good resources. And if you really love this dam safety business and were to take a look at what the various states in the United States are doing and some of the other provinces, they're all doing something similar, and they all have very similar guidelines, but at least the states and provinces that are doing a particularly good job on regulating and supporting dam safety. So you certainly want to take a look through those documents. And as we go forward, Aaron's going to start off with looking at some of these. I think it's Aaron's turn next. I can't remember. Oh, maybe I got a few more things. Sorry. I'm just going to highlight some of the features of a dam and some of the terminology in case you're not familiar. There's a few folks here today that haven't owned a dam for very long. So and we'll be using these terms throughout the next 2 webinars as well. And so, we have the embankment crest or the top of your dam, downstream slope, upstream slope. We have abutments, the right and left. Right and left refer to a dam always when you're looking downstream. A spillway, many of your dams will have a spillway. There's a toe of the embankment. You probably have a low level outlet. You may have a riser on that structure. You may have some sort of valve mechanism, a gate valve or something. So these are all components of your dam that you'll be inspecting. Another view, perhaps a little bit of a different terminology. So here we have a cross section taken through the dam. Again, the crest of the dam. Many small earth and embankment dams will have what's known as a cutoff trench. So the original ground surface is kind of this dashed line, and you excavate below that and compact in usually a less permeable material to create a cutoff trench. Our downstream slopes, upstream slopes, we often will line the surface of our upstream slope with riprap, big chunks of rock. And we have different reservoir elevations, the normal pool elevation as it's described here. There's other terms for that. We may have a spillway or emergency spillway at a certain elevation. And then if the precipitation pattern is a very, very extreme event, we may be the spillway you didn't do a good job of keeping it clean, or there's a beaver dam in it, or water could rise up right up to the crest of the dam and begin to overtop it. We're hoping that doesn't happen for any of your dams, of course. So those are some terms. And another way of kind of showing that, and this again highlights that dead storage and live storage for a structure. If this was the original ground surface and you've dug it out a little bit, we might have some dead storage, with this being our low level outlet. Not key trench again. Dam height, remember that links back to that one of those tables we showed before. What is the definition of dam height? It's kind of shown here. It's from the top of your dam. Typically, this is a constant elevation to the lowest point on the downstream side of your embankment. And that height is linked back to this chart. And so we've asked you a little bit about your dam classification, but we're going to ask you one more question, which is related to how high is your dam? And the height, we're talking about this vertical elevation from the lowest point along the downstream slope of your dam to the crest of your dam. So I'll activate that poll.
And Dwayne, maybe while you're running the poll, we could start or just carry on there. Just starting to drop behind a little bit. Want to make sure we end on time.
Okay. So I'll be quick on this one.
Oh, one thing I mentioned too, or wanted to mention at the beginning, is I had a few people ask, will there be a certificate of attendance given at the end of this? Some people like to record all that information in their binder. So we will be giving one. We'll give you a link to it at the end of the webinar, and then you can download it directly.
Okay, just to speed up the process, I'm going to end the polling now, and I'll share the results. So about half of you have dams 2.5 to 5 meters high. And a few of you have small ones, less than 2.5. And there's one lucky person here that's got a fairly high dam.
Yeah.
7.5 meters.
I guess a lot of them must be upstream of permanent residents if they're high consequence, I suppose. So
yeah. In terms of all these ones, so yeah, they're it looks like quite a few people are probably living in this area here of this table. Can you see my mouse, Aaron? Is it going around?
Yeah, I can see it. As long as everyone's closed their poll results, we'll be able to see it.
Okay. Good. And that's kind of to be expected. We chose those values for the poll because they do link to this kind of chart. And agricultural dams tend not to be huge structures. And that's what we see reflected in the poll. Okay, wonderful.
All right. Dwayne, I can take it here then. Until...
Okay.
Okay, so dam failure modes. Generally, your dams will really only fail two ways. I mean, there's other ways they can fail, but generally overtopping or piping covers almost all the failures. So really, we will always want to be thinking about that whenever we're operating, whenever we're just about anything with dams. When you're inspecting them, you want to be thinking, how can this thing overtop or how can it internally erode? Really, those are the two things. So I'm just taking control here. So things to watch for, right? We can see a couple different ways that your dam can start to crack and slump and fail. So if your whole dam slumps down, well, then you lose your freeboard and it overtops and it erodes. And we've got a really great video in one of the upcoming webinars showing failures and things like that. It's pretty unbelievable how quick they can fail if you haven't seen one fail. So slumping is one. You can see multiple locations of where water can come through. It can come through kind of a contact internal erosion between your actual earth embankment and the foundation. You could have different types of cracking that form a preferential seepage path, but could be because of differential settlement. Maybe your foundation's settling down, and then you have differential settlement, more settlement in the middle than you have on the abutments. So lots of different ways that your dam can potentially overtop or internally erode. So again, always think that in the back of your mind when we start to go through all the different components of your dam and what we want to look for. So here's another, kind of like the last one. I really like this one. You can see a couple different things. This one's kind of an unusual design. We have the spillway in the middle, but we're looking at where could it internally, or where you could get some erosion, some where you might shorten a potential seepage path. So some of the same things. And there's lots of other ones like rodents, if they're burrowing holes that could shorten a seepage path, and a lot of maintenance things. So we'll be going over these here. So the first thing we want to do is cover upstream slope inspection. So if you saw that link I sent, that brings you to all those inspection guidance documents that Dwayne had showed, when you pull them all out, they're all broken down like this: upstream slope, downstream slope, low level outlet. So we're going to cover this one first. So on your upstream slope, if you saw something like this, you definitely have a problem. But this is one thing that could happen. It may not look that large. In fact, a lot of the times when your reservoir is drawn all the way down, it might not look like a problem at all, but you may find there's a bunch of sticks and debris all sort of in one spot. So some, kind of that debris that doesn't quite float and it just sinks slowly. It'll always move toward where your water's flowing. So if you ever have some sort of seepage happen, like a point seep going through your dam, or a little pipe, kind of like what we have shown here, you may want to just uncover those little piles of things. Oh, and here it shows contact erosion, backward erosion, concentrated leaks, effusion. These are different types of internal erosion. And the more you know about your dam, what types of materials your dam is made of, whether it's homogeneous, or whether it's zoned, what types of potential contacts you have, like perforations, so you're in low-level outlet. There's a bunch of different types of erosion that could potentially happen in your dams. And depending on your design, your dam may be more susceptible to one or more of these. So the more you know about your dam, the more likely you'll probably look for some of these things. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a bit here. Sorry, trying to get this to change slides. Okay, here we go. So there's another sinkhole. This is a better example, the top right photo, of what you might see when your dam is drawn down, especially if you have low head dams. These things could actually occur and you might not really notice. So the top photo is one that certainly has already formed, and the one that's lower, it's certainly gotten a lot farther in its erosion process. So sliding or slumping, these are also very obvious photographs. Oftentimes when you have a failure like this, so it's kind of a wedge of material slides down, it may happen very slowly. It might not happen catastrophically like we see in these photos where it just all slumps at once. It may move very slowly and your crest may actually be sort of lower on one side. You may even think it's due to rutting or something like that, and then you level it out. So these types of things you may not easily identify, but it will. Anyway, we're going to cover some other things that this could cause in your dam, but these are definitely big signs of instability. So deteriorated or missing riprap. So again, we're looking at upstream slopes. This one you can tell it's moved down. Oftentimes you don't have any riprap. I imagine at least half of the dams or dam owners we're talking to today probably don't even have any riprap, which is often fine. Oftentimes vegetation is adequate depending on its slope and your fetch. So the type of wind and wave action that you get on your particular reservoirs. But you might start to notice some stepping in your upstream slope. So I think your next slide shows that a little better. So this is quite common. So this one doesn't have riprap, and basically the environment starts to step that, and you'll start to get vegetation growing on that step. And it can actually be quite stable, but oftentimes over time, if you particularly operate your reservoir at one level, it will get to the point where the only way to repair it is to actually reconstruct your upstream slope, and potentially you would want to consider installing riprap. And we have some examples of some of this rehabilitation and repair work in webinar 3. So downstream slope. Sorry,
that's for me, I think.
The downstream slope, okay.
Yep, so we're going to pass over to downstream. Well, coming back to this one, those willows are getting to a stage where they could probably should be trimmed off. It says there's not just riprap, there's a willow issue. Looking at the downstream side, of course, this is a problem that I would imagine that all of you are dealing with all the time. Things want to grow on your dam, and we do have to try to prevent that. We don't want trees growing on dam. We do like to have grasses and small shrubs, but not trees. And so I'm sure you've been dealing with that. We probably also have issues with rodents, both on upstream, perhaps maybe more likely to be on the upstream side, but you can find gophers and muskrats and beavers digging holes in your structures. These can create concentrated seepage pathways through your dam that could trigger piping and then eventual breaching of your structure. So you got to be watching for them. And if you find them, we're going to have to manage the rodents and then fill in the holes. If on the downstream side of your dam, you're seeing a bunch of water starting to bubble up in a spot that it didn't bubble up before, and particularly if that water is carrying a little bit of, if the water is a bit muddy, that's evidence that there's some seepage either going completely underneath the foundation of your dam, maybe that cutoff wall wasn't deep enough, or possibly somewhat through the dam and then popping out. And that's something that needs to be dealt with fairly quickly. So that's what we call a seepage boil. And of course, we're looking for changes in behavior. To have seepage through a dam is totally expected. These structures aren't waterproof or watertight, but if the seepage becomes concentrated or changes and increases, and if that seepage is carrying muddy water, we're concerned about piping failures. And here's an example. I think we're going to talk about this example in a future webinar where we're tracking some seepage. This is a dam, and there's some seepage coming through on the downstream side. Again, as I said, if that seepage is the volume is increased and the water is starting to carry sediments in soil because it's muddy, then we're concerned because that might be a sign that we're leading towards failure. And a couple of examples. I mean, vegetation is a nice indicator where water is kind of concentrating as it seeps through a dam. So you can see even here, the grasses are a little bit thicker and greener, and you can see how wet it is right there. We're always concerned about changes in seepage and maybe new growth of vegetation, cattails growing on your dam or at the toe of your dam that didn't exist there before might be indicating increasing seepage. And yet another example. And for seepage, we're often worried about through the embankment itself, under the foundation. That was one of the previous examples. So it can go through the embankment, under the embankment, or at the embankment valley wall, as kind of shown here at the abutment. So there's various areas where we have to watch for seepage, in particular changes in seepage, an increasing amount of seepage. Coming back to kind of the surface of the embankment itself, erosion, just water running down the surface of your embankment can create little gullies and rills. Initially is maybe not such a big concern, but if these things start to concentrate flow and start to eat away on your dam, you're going to have to come in there and repair that structure. And these can occur even on quite small structures. And then some things that can create more erosion of your dam are animals, cattle, quads, motorcycles, four-wheel drives, creating ruts and trails across your embankment. Aaron, are you down in this picture someplace?
Yeah, I think so. I'd be walking around there somewhere.
Yeah, dealing, and so we try to keep cattle off of the embankment itself because they tend to start to walk on a certain trail and can create tracks that then concentrate flow, that then concentrate erosion. Crest coming. So when we build our dams, and after we've completed the dam, it's very convenient to have the crest at almost a constant elevation, perfectly flat and horizontal, because it then enables you to take a quick look along that crest and you can see if there's any changes, any settlement or displacements. And if you do see low spots, that's indicating something's potentially going wrong. Now, when you build an embankment through a kind of a stream or a valley, what will happen naturally is the embankment will settle and consolidate more where the fill was thicker. So the construction technique would be to over construct, make it a little bit higher directly above the lowest part of the valley, and then give it a few years, it'll settle, and then hopefully you're getting a nice planar flat top on your dam, because your eyeball is very, very good at picking up small little dips in the crest of your embankment. Maybe that's caused by erosion, but maybe it's caused by something more serious, and we want to be watching for these low areas. Of course, you're losing freeboard and a bunch of other things because of that low area, but it may be diagnostic of something that's happening in the embankment or even underneath the embankment that's causing settlement. Cracking, there's different types of cracks to watch for in an embankment. We can have cracks that run kind of perpendicular to the long axis of your dam. We call them transverse cracks. And coming up shortly, we'll have the other kinds of cracks. These types of cracks tend to occur if there's some sort of differential settlement in the structure, and the presence of the crack, if it gets down far enough, could create a seepage path for water. And then you get internal erosion, and it could cause breaching of your embankment. So we want to watch for these things. Are they growing? And then there's, if you do get significant cracks, we're going to have to repair the embankment. So that's a transverse crack. The longitudinal crack runs this way, and they're often a precursor to, let's say, a slump or a little landslide on your dam. And they're evidence that your embankment is potentially not stable. Perhaps it's too steep, or the materials that were chosen weren't as strong as you thought they were, or there's some foundation problems. So we're looking for longitudinal cracks and transverse cracks. Outlets, back to you, Aaron.
All right. And that last one, the longitudinal cracking, is what I was referring to. Yeah, that one. Quite often you might not see such an obvious crack. We always like taking photos that are a little more obvious. So if you try to imagine the material kind of still being together, but one side being a little lower than the other. And I have seen that on a number of occasions. And it was later determined to actually be the lower half of the dam was slumping down. So keep an eye out for that, because that's definitely a problem with your dam. So outlet inspection. So the thing about outlets is they are, again, areas that dams can often fail because you have a penetration through your dam, you have a preferential seepage path. I noticed on the poll, it said most of the dam owners attending today have dams that are older than 15 years. So any dam that was built more than 15 years ago probably still had, they call them seepage collars. So, and we've learned now that seepage collars are not ideal because they are often areas that are difficult to compact around when constructing.
Sorry, Aaron.
It's all right. I was trying to take over here on the, okay. So when we're inspecting them, we can't really see up them. They're buried, so we can't see around them inside the embankment. So we have to start thinking about what can we look at on the surface visually that could indicate other problems. So there's a picture of one that I inspected, and even not having CCTV equipment or anything with me, just a few meters in, you could see cracking. So, and oftentimes that is the case where because the part that's closest to the lower end of your low-level outlet, it's closest to potential root intrusion and some other things, right? So oftentimes you can get, and it is a sample of your entire low-level outlet. Granted, you haven't inspected the whole thing, but it certainly gives you some indication as to what the condition of your outlet pipe may be. So, so there you go. There's one photo there. So joint offset. This is an interesting, another interesting one that this particular dam had some failures at the joint. As you can see, there's some misalignment. And I believe it was even patched, and I think you can see some of that patchwork over on this side here. But we just talked about that differential settlement on the crest, where your downstream slope could be slumping. You could have some stability issues with your dam. Dwayne, do you mind just drawing a cross section on the bottom left there of a dam showing a slump failure?
Sure.
So just imagine if your low-level outlet is going through your dam from upstream to downstream. Now there's Dwayne, he's drawing a little water on the upstream. And then imagine your downstream, side of the dam. There you go. It's kind of sliding along that slip plane, kind of like a Morse Coulomb failure. But imagine if you've got a low-level outlet going through that, and all the earth on your downstream is kind of slowly moving. And this could happen over many years. It could be a very slow failure, maybe from cyclical loading or whatever, from reservoir going up and down, who knows. And what you might have is that lower section of pipe is actually kind of moving along with the material. So it doesn't matter how you repair that joint, you're still going to have continual problems with that low-level outlet. See, Dwayne's just circled that there. So you can learn a lot about what your dam is doing inside sometimes by looking on the surface. So that's a really good example there. And again, that particular case, I don't think was that far up. I think you probably would have still had to camera that one or climb in it, which you shouldn't do. But we can learn a lot about what's going on with our dam from other things. Here's another example. This one, actually, remember how I talked about inspection and surveillance forms that you want to customize them? This particular owner had a customized one, and they had a left, again, looking downstream, and right outlet seepage weir, or I should say embankment drain. So basically they had a filter on the end of their dam, on the toe of their dam, that filtered the seepage water that goes through the dam. And then they had two drainage pipes left and right of the low-level outlet that they would throw a bucket under, time it, and measure how much water is going there. We're going to talk a lot more about those types of measurements and operation maintenance stuff in webinar 2. But in this particular case, everyone typically looks at the last inspection before they do the current year inspection. And what happened was the person noticed there was some change from the ones before, and then looking at the surveillance documents, noticed that there were more changes. And actually the regulator was instrumental in this case, because they saw the notes and actually put a little memo together showing them and said, hey guys, you better look at this. Sure enough, there was a perforation there into, well, there's many perforations, but one of the big perforations was into the filter. So every time they released water, it would just go into their filter and was slowly internally eroding and carrying away their filter, shortening the seepage pass and removing the filter of embankment material. And so it was really important that that got repaired. I won't go into the repair details, but had you not repaired it or been monitoring those seepage flows, you probably could have had something like this. This was not our photo, but it gives you an idea of what could have happened. And in the particular case of this dam that had that problem, it was on above a very steep ravine and was of a consequence that had permanent residents down below, and very probably certainly could have caused loss of life had it not been repaired. So again, an example why we have these minimum best practices. So here's another dam that was inspected, and again, it's good to regularly and when I say regularly, maybe every 5 years. If your dam's older, maybe every 2 years. Camera your low-level outlets. It's cheap insurance to do, and you can learn a lot about it. So when you can't do it with your own eyes, doing your regular inspection, it's a good idea to do that because you can learn things about it. So these photos just show some scour. This particular section of pipe was built in the late 70s, and it was the end pieces were actually in worse condition than the center, which it was built in the early 1900s, close to the turn of the century. But again, a great reason why you can't see 61 meters down your pipe. So again, a good reason. And here's something you can see with your eyes. If your dam looks like this, it might not be imminently ready to fail, but it's definitely a good time to rehabilitate your dam. So this obviously would be difficult to monitor any seepage. The drains were failed. This particular photo was taken in 2012. And we're going to show an example of how you would conduct a repair like this and sort of what's involved when it comes to regulatory submissions and things like that. So outlet erosion, again, when you get that undercutting, again, along a preferential seepage path, as that erodes, you could have burrowing animals under there too. It's just a good time to It's low-hanging fruit. It's easy to repair. It's easy to maintain and remove the vegetation, and to just go ahead and do that. Whoops, I went too. So here's seepage. This particular dam I won't go into, but had a lot of seepage coming around the low-level outlet. So the phreatic surface, or the water level, or kind of groundwater in the dam, was quite high. Now, there's a lot of seepage there, and the question is, what's a lot of seepage, right? You look at it, you kind of explain it, but again, such a good reason that if you're seeing seepage, you're seeing some of that aquatic vegetation, kind of I'm showing around there. You have sustained amount of water flowing through your dam at those locations. It's best to at least measure it, and then you can find out if you have a problem. It's best to probably consult an engineer at that time if you're not sure. And it's always good to monitor, because if you see a change of condition, typically any change of condition over time is usually not a good thing. So, and again, this is what's probably going to happen if you don't stay on top of it. So again, seepage adjacent to a perforation in your dam. And one more thing is the upstream. Oftentimes we think, well, the upstream is probably not as important, because it might not really cause the dam to catastrophically fail. But when you think about it, if something were to fail, something gets in there and clogs it, say it were to collapse, then you lose your water source. And that is the whole reason why you have a dam. And then you lose really the purpose of that piece of infrastructure. Also, it makes it very difficult to repair, because if it's collapsed, you probably need to draw your reservoir down. And without having a low-level outlet, it's really not easy to do, and it becomes a lot more work than if you were to just plan for that rehabilitation and those repairs. So again, when you have the water down, it's so much easier to have a look at it at that time, and to plan for it, because a lot of times you really need to plan ahead. You know that you can only have it down like that maybe at fall and before winter hits. So you almost need to be ready in the summer and maybe let out a little extra water this year so that you can actually complete that task. So outlet control problems, I'll try to pick it up here a little bit. Lots of things can go wrong. This particular case, I think you can't quite see it, but there's a little coupler right here that failed. You can see there's lots of corrosion, and this was quite an old one. So it's a lot easier to maintain those connections and those pins. Have a look at your whole string, make sure everything looks good before you really need it and you snap the pin. So here's another example. The photo on the top, this one ended up just sort of seizing, because you can even see the grease reservoir there. It just kept filling with water. The one underneath, rock got into the, that's actually a slide gate. Can't really tell what that is. That's the frame of a vertical gate. and a rock fell into there. And so we had to get a little creative, welded a little hook on the end of our CCTV camera, managed to pull it out. But again, it wasn't a good reason to check your valves, check and make sure things work, because in this particular case, we needed to open it because it was an emergency and we wanted to get some additional water out of the reservoir, and the gate had not been tested. So again, that's something you should be doing on your annual inspections. This is just an upstream, goes along the upstream face, slides up and down from a wheel. Many of you probably have something like this. If it's flopping around and it's difficult to open and close, it's time to just service it. This one, it opened fine because you can pull it fine, but as you know, once you put compression on that, you're trying to slide a gate that's kind of stuck. It didn't work very well. So spillway inspection. I think, Dwayne, these are yours here.
Yep, I'll take over. And we're getting close to the end of our hour and a half, so I'll have to be fairly quick here. A common issue with our dams, there are rodents, beavers, creating blockages in our spillways. And so this can be a real problem, particularly during the spring freshet. So, you know, you don't want these things to get established and blocking your spillway. I think it's pretty obvious. Here's another example where the white arrow was kind of showing a big block of soil and vegetation. You can have organic material that can float in your reservoir, and it could, under high water and wind, it can move down and into your spillway, blocking your spillway. Of course, we like to have log booms to kind of protect and keep our spillways clean of blockages that could move into the spillway itself. Overtopping of dams because of under capacity spillways is probably the most common failure mechanism for some of our earthen embankments. You know, often they were actually built or designed and built, perhaps undersized, but certainly if you then add debris into those spillways, you got a real problem. So we got to keep them clean. Here's another example where we have a concrete sill in the spillway, and you know it's not so bad here because it's not really blocking off, but we can have debris build up if you don't have a log boom. Perhaps timber floats down and gets jammed into your into the narrow part of your spillway right at your sill, and now you've lost that spillway capacity. So we have to keep those spillways clean. We often do that. We often protect the spillways using a log boom, and this particular picture shows that they're just in the process of upgrading a log boom. And you know, normally we're going to anchor it to, well, either to a tree or maybe perhaps some eye bolts, great big bolts anchored into the ground, and then a wire rope connected to the floating booms runs across in front of your spillway. And there's guidelines for what the diameter should be for these things, and how far the hole in the boom should be drilled from the end, and how you could anchor these things. And so it's a pretty common practice to make use of log booms to help keep spillways clear of floating debris.
It's helpful if it's connected too.
Yes, and how
like that photo.
Yeah. And how it's connected, yeah. So we have kind of a little test for you. Here's a photograph, and can you spot some problems? Or what problems do you see in this photograph? There's no poll, but just take a moment to kind of scan through the photograph, and what kind of problems can you quickly identify by just simply looking at the photograph. And then I'll let Aaron take the next slide and walk through some of the things that his eye sees when he looks at that same photograph.
Yeah, and do chat in, everyone. We see your answers, and we will bring them up as they come in.
One of the answers is cracks in the cement wall. Definitely, you can see some cracks in the wall. Yep. Yeah. Want to go forward, Aaron?
What's that?
Take it to the next slide.
Yeah, I just
tell me what you can see.
Guess we got to keep moving. And again, feel free. Yeah, cracks and spillway, debris blocking spillway. Yes, and that actually looks kind of like a decrepit log boom that's not working. So that's a good one there. There's actually quite a few things with this one, and if anyone looked at the slides prior, they'd probably have some of the answers.
Right.
But
So there's some things.
so there we go. Sloughing, actually scour. That's very good. Yeah, it doesn't say sloughing, but there was sloughing, and you're right. See that loss of crest width? That is exactly what we were talking about before. That whole kind of corner of the dam slumped down. And I realize the photo is not really large on your screens, or that you can't zoom in, but you'll also notice a lot of that vegetation is aquatic. If you inspected it a week later, you'd realize you're covered in poison ivy. And usually if poison ivy is growing all over your crest, it's probably pretty wet for some reason. So, I mean, yeah, you're seeing aquatic vegetation all over. The water levels essentially spilling at the or near the crest. So that's not a very good design to have no
Yeah,
freeboard.
our freeboard here is pretty small.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of things here, right? You can see the vertical, the actual spillway, and this is something too. If you're ever inspecting concrete spillways without getting a level on it, you can also learn a lot just by looking at how the water flows. The water's flowing off to the one side, so there's quite a few problems. This is kind of a star example to show a lot of problems all in one place. So,
And in one small dam too, right? It's a small dam, small little
yeah,
spillway, right?
that's right. And I think it was in this case, it was a low consequence dam. And then, yeah, later it was upgraded. So,
Okay, so we're coming near the end here, and
yeah.
we just wanted to reiterate the importance of documenting your inspection. So all those different things that we just sort of walked through kind of quickly are things that you might identify, and we're hoping that you don't see these deficiencies, but when you do see deficiencies, you should document them, and of course, depending on the I guess the severity of the deficiency, implement repair maintenance activities, again, which is something we're covering in the next webinar. And so there are a desire to indicate things, the degree of action that's required. And so some of your formal annual inspection is often where you are also indicating to yourself what the strategy is and the timing for maintenance to kind of rectify any deficiencies that you've identified in that dam. Of course, there are lots of other resources available on the website from the BC Dam Safety section, and these templates and things like that are there. The BC Dam Safety section and the materials they provide there is fairly comprehensive. And for those of you that have owned dams for greater than 15 years, and that was quite a large number of you, you might have seen, or you should have seen, how the breadth and depth of resources that are available has increased on this particular website. So it's worthwhile to kind of reacquaint yourself with the resources that are available there. And I don't know, perhaps the webinar today will show up there at some point. We're not sure where the video is going to go. And then, we have another webinar next week, same time, same place, different topic. We're focusing on the operations, maintenance, and repair. And that might be a little bit more interesting to some of you that own dams, and to look at what some other people have done in terms of their maintenance and repairs and the type of deficiencies that they've encountered. We do have one more quick poll, if it's okay for you. It'll help us a little bit get prepared for next week. And here's the questions, and I'll activate the poll here shortly, just to get a little bit of feedback on the webinar, the duration of the webinar. So just give me a second here to to get this poll up and running. And thank you for participating in these polls today. So while the polls sort of sitting there running, if you have any questions, we're going to stick around and stop the sharing of the slides. And if you have questions, we could potentially activate your microphone if it's easier for you to ask the questions. You can send us a quick chat that you want to do it that way. We do have representatives from the dam safety section as members of the audience here today. So if you have questions for the BC Dam Safety section, we can address some of those here as well.
And Dwayne, I'm just sharing the invitation letter right now that many of you would have already received for this one. So you can click on that. It'll give you all the information for the next 2 webinars coming up. And I think most importantly is right in that letter, it has hot links to all the printed resources that were sent out. And I'd like to bring your attention to, in particular, there's one called the Interior Dams Resource Summary. So what we've done, we spent a lot of time and put together a little commentary on every single resource, at least BC resource, that is available, at least to our knowledge right now, and a little quick blurb. And again, this is the opinions of Interior Dams, but how we think they are useful, particularly for dam owners. So for example, the BC or the Water Sustainability Act, but how that pertains to dam owners. So that will help many of you navigate that information. And also, I am going to attach the dam safety section has asked us to share a questionnaire. So this will also guide them on upcoming, whether they be hopefully in-person workshops or some more of these webinars. So if you can please fill that out, I'm just sharing that in the chat now. And I'm also going to share with you the certificate of attendance because I know many of you had asked for that as well. So that is all in your chat there.
Well, thanks for the feedback on the webinar itself. It sounds like the pace is about right. Perhaps a little bit long for some 3 people, and we might be cutting into your dinner time or something. We tried to find it, well, we try to find a time that would be convenient for everyone. And it sounds like some of you have learned something new and useful, which is really what the whole purpose behind these things are, which is fantastic. I think the webinars coming up will have a little bit more focus. At least webinar number 2 has a focus on a lot of practical things associated with maintenance and repairs. And webinar 3, in terms of emergency planning, is something, I know it's a little bit text heavy, that webinar, but then we'll walk through some sort of scenarios about what could go wrong and how should you respond to those emergencies or unfolding emergencies. So thank you for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon. And I'll sort of let everybody get back to making dinner and spending time with their families on a Saturday. And it was a pleasure spending Saturday afternoon with you.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you all as well. And in my opinion, I think the next 2 webinars are a lot more fun, and they have a lot more examples of real case studies and things that you can really take away and learn from. These were kind of the basics on how to inspect and how to find those things. So the next 2 are quite a bit more hands-on. So we really hope to see you next Saturday, same time, same links, same link location. So, all right.